Making room for joy and play and lightness and freedom isn't about adding something extra to your life. It's about allowing something back in. Welcome to Oxygen for Educators. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi folks, welcome back to the Radical Hope series. Today we are taking on the importance of joy and play and how that fits into this notion of integration as a protective factor. So again, if you think of our arc across the entire series, if inner work helps us understand ourselves and connection is how we support and steady each other, integration is what allows that work to show up in our lives and relationships, moment to moment, interaction to interaction. When we integrate the work we do within and between us, it moves out of the theoretical and into our bodies. Insight becomes practice. When the work doesn't just stay as something we are considering, but becomes something we actually experience. And one of the clearest, most overlooked signals that integration is happening is our capacity for joy and play, not as an escape or as something we quote unquote earn once everything is done, but as something that can exist alongside responsibility and grief and complexity. Because when our nervous system becomes even slightly more resourced, we don't just think differently, we begin to experience life differently. And often, one of the first signs of that is access to a little more lightness, a little more curiosity, and a little more freedom. And what is it that makes that possible? We often think about nervous system regulation as something we do when things go wrong. But there's another way to think about it. We can also build lives that tune into and curate signals of safety. And joy and play are some of the clearest signals of safety we have. Because when you think about our evolution, biologically, play doesn't happen in the presence of true danger. So when we create even small moments of lightness and freedom, we are communicating to our system, we are safe enough right now. And because play can be hard to sell to busy, stressed adults, I think of it this way. Making room in our lives for moments of lightness and freedom and developing the capacity to notice them, shape them, and actually savor them. Because otherwise we dismiss play. We think that's for kids or vacation or something we'll come back to later. There is a quote that often gets attributed to Albert Einstein. He said, "Play is the highest form of research." And I think that captures something important. This state of lightness and openness isn't separate from how we learn and grow and create. It's part of it. And there's a subtle shift here that can change how we relate to it. We often think of joy and play as strategies, something we do to feel better. But we can also think of them as signals. They tell us something about the state of our system. So instead of asking, how do I add more joy? You might also ask, what is my system telling me about how safe or resourced I feel based on how accessible joy is right now? And listen, if joy feels hard to access, that doesn't mean something is wrong. For most of us, we didn't consciously choose to let go of it. We were actually trained out of it. Be efficient, be appropriate, be productive. And over time, play starts to feel less relevant and less accessible. And many of us have become incredibly good at being efficient, moving quickly, staying on task, getting through what needs to get done. But efficiency has a shadow side. It trains us to move past anything that doesn't seem immediately necessary. And the problem is that joy and play rarely look quote unquote necessary in that moment. So they get filtered out. But it's not because they don't matter, it's because they don't register as urgent. I actually noticed this in my own life recently when I found myself going through my days kind of bracing for more bad news. And honestly, it had become like a resting state for me. That intense bracing state, I had turned into my resting state, which obviously is not resting. Um, I got a little win just by noticing I was doing it. It released a little just noticing. So don't sleep on the fact that just awareness can give us relief. Got a little relief there. And then I tried something small. I tried imagining that bracing state that I pictured as almost like steel or iron and impermeable. I began to picture it as porous. So it wasn't anymore something I had to break through or break off of me. It was something that I could just a little bit at a time, over time, let a little light in. And then I began to tune into micro moments of lightness and freedom. And I'm not kidding when I say micro moments. I'm talking about a, a color in a painting that lights something up in me, and noticing that, paying attention and letting myself be in that moment for a second. I have started the whole like countertop garden thing, and there's little baby lettuce and tomato and herb sprouts, and I'm like a 10-year-old on the enthusiasm scale, and I'm letting myself feel that childlike wonder and childlike excitement of trying something new. Just this morning we were walking our dogs, and one of our dogs loves to do the kind of shoulder down full body roll whenever we pass like fresh cut grass or something. And she was doing it this morning, and there's been plenty of mornings that I'm like just rushing her along and barely taking in the joy of that. Today I let it sink in, and just enjoyed the ridiculousness of her delight and my delight in getting to witness it. So just that notion of, instead of like moving quickly past those little moments that happen all day long every day, letting those moments land. That's the practice I was doing. And listen, they did their work. They did their work not just on how I felt in those moments, but on that bracing state that I'd been carrying around. And I didn't have to force anything. I didn't have to do anything like massively dramatic. I just had to become aware, notice, let it in, let it in, let it in over and over. And that changed my state. And I don't feel like I'm walking around in that bracing, resting state anymore. There's more. There's more to this though than just efficiency. That's not the only thing that makes us move past moments of joy and play and lightness and freedom. There's another layer that is worth noting and saying out loud. For many people, especially in today's world, there's a real sense of guilt that can come around joy and play. There's so much heaviness in the world, and there's just so much that is hard, that is uncertain, that is unjust. And there can be a question in the background for us: how can I let myself feel joy when all of this is happening? Or even, is it okay to experience lightness when others are suffering? And I personally have grappled and even been flattened by that question. And the question makes sense if you're holding it too. It speaks to your awareness, it speaks to your empathy, your care. But what can happen is that we begin to believe that joy is somehow in conflict with caring. And what I would offer is that joy and play are not a betrayal of what's hard. They are part of what allows us to stay engaged with what's hard. Because when we lose access to lightness and curiosity and connection, we don't become more effective. We become more depleted and over time more disconnected. So this isn't about choosing joy instead of awareness. It's actually about allowing both to exist. One way to understand why this matters is thinking about bandwidth. When our system is under strain, our world narrows, but joy and play expand our field of awareness. They allow us to see more options, more nuance, and more possibility. Mark Nepo says, joy in what we do is not an added feature. It's a sign of deep health. That's true for individuals, it's true for families, and it's true for systems. If you're in a situation where the joy has been 100% sucked out of the building or the relationship, that is all the flags waving. If you're in a situation that has all the complexity and all the hardness, but woven into that, there's moments of lightness and freedom and play and joy, remember his words. It's not an added feature. It's a sign of deep health, not something extra, a sign that something in us is resourced enough to stay open. And this is where it connects back to integration. When we make room for joy and play, we strengthen our access to that place of safety and connection, that ventral vagal anchor, so that when we get pulled into stress, it begins to feel more temporary than permanent. And the path back to that safe and connected nervous system state becomes more familiar and more accessible. And part of why this works is because joy carries information. It tells us this matters, this fits, this is aligned. And most of the time, those moments, they're there. It's not like you had to go out and discover them. You've maybe just lost connection. They are there, they're showing up in your life, but they often are coming in and out pretty quick and sometimes too quick to register. So this isn't always about creating something new. It can be about noticing what's already happening and letting it land. So if you experiment with one thing, let it be this. Just let it land. Let the things in your life that are quirky, peculiar, funny, joyful, puzzling, interesting, curious, let them take up space in your brain, in your heart, in your soul, in your nervous system. Stay with those moments just 1 or 2 breaths longer than you normally would. I've noticed something actually working on this episode this last couple of weeks, simply bringing more awareness to moments of joy and play has changed how I move through my days. And it's not dramatic, but it is 100% palpable. Like I'm not searching for it. I notice it. Each moment that I let in, it has the capacity to light something up in me. And sometimes it lights up and it quickly goes back out. Sometimes it lights up and then it connects to something else that lights up and the flame gets stronger and more sustained. But over time, that has started to shape my days without me reinforcing it. I find myself naturally making small adjustments, like really smelling the coffee, those freshly ground coffee beans before I make the coffee, or, playing my favorite song just a little bit louder, going around the block one more time so I can finish a set from a comedian I love before moving on to the next thing. Subtle shifts, but they add up. And what's been interesting is, and I really hope you hear this, especially my fellow overachievers, I am getting the same amount of work done, if not more, by tuning into these moments all day long, every day. This kind of rhythm with my day, not pushing through it, but being in relationship with the moment to moment of my day, is making me more creative, more innovative, more productive. It's not the fear we have that if we open ourselves up to that type of inner world, that we'll lose our edge or not be as productive, or all of the different narratives we tell ourselves. There's something else I want to point out. We know, all of us probably can speak to how quickly our system can move into stress or into like a full hijack. Sometimes it doesn't even take much. It can be just like a thought or a moment, a shift in tone, and boom, we're there. What we think about less and can be less obvious is that very small moments can also begin to shift us back. Not like all the way or instantly necessarily, but just enough to create a little more space. I bet you've noticed it too. Sometimes an intentional breath, a kind glance with a stranger, a moment of shared laughter with a friend, those little moments begin to pull me into a regulated nervous system in the same way that little moments can tank me into a survival state. For some of us, those shifts are pretty noticeable right away. But for others, especially if you've been in a sustained state of stress, it might feel much more subtle, like almost nothing is happening. But even then, something is being signaled to your system. Something is beginning to open. And over time, those small moments can add up until they become observable to you. And they add up more robustly if we register them and stay with them even for a beat longer than is our norm. It's also important to say that there may be times when even this feels out of reach, when accessing joy or play or even a small moment of lightness just isn't available. And if that's where you are, there's nothing wrong with you. That's not a failure of practice. It's information about what your system needs right now. And often in those moments, the first step isn't toward joy. It's toward self-compassion and kindness, toward meeting yourself just with a little more compassion right where you are. Martha Beck talks about this idea that when we're struggling, the most helpful question often isn't, how do I fix this? But something more like, what would feel like kindness right now? And sometimes that's very simple. It might be softening your expectations, or taking a break without needing to justify it, or speaking to yourself in a different tone. Because that kind of kindness, that kind of self-compassion begins to create the conditions of safety. And from there, something else can start to open. And another gentle way in, especially when joy and play feel far away, is through your senses. Not trying to change how you feel, but simply noticing your sensory experience that can help you move back into your body. Looking around the room, what do you notice? What do you see? What did the things you see make you feel? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel in your body? Questions like that can be an inroad into presence. And some answers are like maybe you feel the warmth of the cup in your hand. You hear the sound of something familiar. Maybe you feel your feet on the ground. Those sensory experiences and tuning into them are not dramatic shifts, but they are a way of helping your system orient to the present moment and to a little bit more safety. And from that place, sometimes lightness begins to return. And if it's helpful to have something a little more concrete, there's a simple rhythm that some people use as a guide when it comes to bringing more joy and play and lightness and freedom into your days and into your life. What this rhythm does is it starts to chip away at the notion that we save all the good stuff for a week of vacation each summer. And it makes the case for building in the good stuff every hour, every day, every week, every month. So this isn't like a rigid formula. It's just something to think about to shake us out of our natural patterns of just driving right past the good stuff. So this is it. For every 60 minutes, a minute. For every 4 hours, 15 minutes. For every day, an hour. For every week, a day. For every month, a weekend. And again, this isn't a prescription. It's not something to track or get right. It's just a reminder that lightness, space, and restoration are not meant to be occasional. They're meant to be part of the rhythm of our lives. And listen, if the notion of giving yourself a day or a weekend feels nuts to you right now, no problem. Then start with the minute, 1 minute every hour that you just allow lightness and freedom to come into your system. As you begin to experiment with this, it might also be helpful to notice the difference between what truly feels like play and joy and what we sometimes reach for when we're trying to self-medicate or get away from whatever feeling we're having. And, not trying to introduce something to kind of turn against yourself as judgment, but just a point of awareness. And one way you can really begin teasing out is what I'm doing restorative or am I avoiding is to pay attention to how you feel afterwards. Do you feel a little more open, a little more present, a little more like yourself? Or do you feel more disconnected, more depleted, or like you need more of the same thing to just keep going? And listen, I can think of times when I've done the exact same thing and felt open, present, and more like myself, and times when I've done it in a different moment when I was really just kind of trying to numb out. And on the other side of binging a show or whatever, I felt disconnected, depleted, and kind of less like myself. So it's not so much the event as what is it you're seeking to do by engaging in it? Are you seeking to numb, or are you seeking to connect more deeply to yourself and your inner world? So this is about learning what actually restores you, because joy and play don't pull us away from ourselves. They tend to bring us more fully back. That's what we want to see happen. One way to begin doing that more intentionally is to identify what Deb Dana calls anchors, things that bring you back to a more resourced state. And you can actually try it right now. Just begin asking yourself, who are the people that you feel most like yourself when you're around them? Where does your body soften and relax and kind of exhale? Is there like a location or a spot in your house? What moments already hold a little more ease for you? Um, for some people, the where is a time of day, or I'm sorry, a location. Then you've got also the when. Um, for me, mornings are a ventral vagal anchor for me, especially if I'm intentional about how I start my day. For other people, their evening rituals hold that importance. Once you know what your ventral vagal anchors are, you can think about them and get a nervous system lift, even not doing them. They're very, very powerful. And so identifying those and having them somewhere that you can access when you start feeling like you might be slipping away from your true self or slipping down into a survival state, that can help you anchor back into that ventral vagal safe and connected place. I think sometimes it's not like we lose joy because it disappears. We lose it because our minds get busy and our hearts get heavy, and we forget. We forget something that is still true, even in the middle of everything. And this, when I want to play with this concept, there's a poem I go to that is by Hafiz. It's called The Sacred Dance for Life. It's brief, so I'll read it to you. Hope that's okay. He says, I sometimes forget that I was created for joy. My mind is too busy. My heart is too heavy, heavy for me to remember that I have been called to dance, the sacred dance for life. I was created to smile, to love, to be lifted up and lift others up. O sacred one, untangle my feet from all that ensnares. Free my soul that we might dance and that our dancing might be contagious. I sometimes forget that I was created for joy. My mind is too busy. My heart is too heavy, heavy for me to remember that I have been called to dance the sacred dance for life. And then that ending part. O sacred one, untangle my feet from all that ensnares. Free my soul that we might dance and that our dancing might be contagious. Making room for joy and play and lightness and freedom isn't about adding something extra to your life. It's about allowing something back in. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next week with an interview. Take care. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators. Please like, share, and follow, and if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to use their own judgment and seek appropriate professional support when needed. Oxygen for Educators, its host, and production partners are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information shared in this podcast.